What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG on the YouTube.com. We like magic, and it was a big weekend. We just had Pro Tour Kaladesh, the biggest tournament of the season, so far at least, and one of the biggest tournaments we'll see all season. What I'm going to do this time is give you the top 8 from that tournament. These are essentially, officially, the best decks in the whole format right now. And the good news is that it's a pretty diverse top 8. There's a fair amount of aggro. There's a few control decks that did extraordinarily well over the weekend, actually. There's a lot. There's a combo deck in the top 8, too. So we got a diverse and much cheaper than usual standard, or at least cheaper than the last standard, to look forward to from here on out. Let's start with number 8. That's Joey Manor's blue-white flash deck. And this is sort of a surprise. A lot of people called that a blue-white control deck would be pretty good in the upcoming format here, but a lot of people didn't think it would take this shape. A lot of flash creatures in this deck, a lot of just the best flash creatures in the format, obviously, Rattle Chains and Spell Queller, and then a 4 of Archangel Avacyn so we can play like a control deck with our flash guys. But since we're playing blue and white, Reflector Mage is definitely going to show up. Selfless Spirit is there, the old 1-2 with Archangel Avacyn, always nice. And note the 4 of Gideon and the 4 of Thraben Inspector. These are cards that we'll see an awful lot as we move through the top 8 here. And Planeswalkers were not incredibly popular over the weekend, but Gideon was. He was sort of the exception to the rule over the weekend. We will see a lot of Gideon in this top 8. Also note Smuggler's Copter right there. Another thing we'll see a lot of. A lot of decks were just jamming Smuggler's Copter. It's sort of the de facto best card in the format right now, and pretty much every deck that jammed it, it was totally worth jamming. Gotta play a playset of this in almost anything nowadays, especially if your strategy is creature-based in any way. Smuggler's Copter really proved its worth. A lot of people have been playing it for the first 2 weeks of the format. It is already format defining, and it really proved itself over the weekend. We will be playing this for the next year, pretty much guaranteed. Here are the lands on the board right here. The lands are pretty easy to figure out, but I do want to point out the 2 of Westvale Abbey, a card that still exists in this format and is still pretty darn good, so I do not blame him playing that at all. And then the sideboard right here. Note Ceremonious Rejection first. That's another card that was very popular in sideboards over the weekend, and warranted too. In a format where Smuggler's Copter is as good as it is, it's a huge threat. It's in nearly every big deck in the format. Ceremonious Rejection is just a great card. On to number 7. In 7th place, we had Li Shiqian, who came in with Mardu Vehicles, a deck that I don't think a whole lot of people saw coming. A lot of people were looking at red-white vehicles. Obviously, red-white vehicles, pretty good deck the first couple of weeks of the format. But he went in with black, mostly so he could play Scrapheap Scrounger and Unlicensed Disintegration in the main. Scrapheap Scrounger, I think, definitely a good idea in this deck. We play 23 creatures, and a lot of them are 1-drops. Very, very low to the ground. We play 12 1-drops in this deck, and we will see this suite of 1-drops again a little bit later as we move through the decks here. But again, low to the ground, a lot of our creatures will be dying early just through normal combat interactions, and that's when Scrapheap Scrounger gets really, really good. Just a constant threat that can crew vehicles too. So I definitely see the point in adding black, mostly for Scrounger, but it also opens up Disintegration, which has been a very, very good card from what I've seen of it in the first couple of weeks of the format, and I definitely endorse adding black to play that. Cultivator's Caravan, note the presence of that instead of Sky Sovereign or Fleet Wheel Cruiser. We have 3 colors in this deck. So Caravan is good mana fixing, which we're going to need. It's pretty low cost for what it is. And it's a 5/5 when we need it to be. That's a pretty stinking big creature. So it just does an awful lot for us. Here are the lands right here for you. Note Aether Hub is in there. Of course, it produces 1 color of mana just the one time in this deck. Depending on how you play Harness Lightning, you can take out a 2 toughness guy and still have an energy left over to tap Aether Hub with. But what we saw a lot of over the weekend was the opposite of that. We saw people playing Aether Hub, just tapping it for colorless mana a lot of the game, and using that energy that it provides to get a bump on Harness Lightning. Harness Lightning, after you play an Aether Hub, can essentially take out a 4 toughness guy, and I saw that a lot in the coverage this weekend. Here's the sideboard for you. Note the hilarious presence of a 4 of Ceremonious Rejection in a deck that does not play blue, but the deck does play Aether Hub, and it does play Cultivator's Caravan, so it's got ways of getting that blue mana right there. Not much more than that. Spire Bluff Canal is in the deck, obviously. You see that. But really, that's the only reason that we need the blue is Ceremonious Rejection. People thought it was that important going into the weekend. Just if there's any illustration of how good Ceremonious Rejection is and how much of a scourge Smuggler's Copter is, it's that right there. A deck that literally jams a whole color just to play Ceremonious Rejection. Sixth place over the weekend was Matthew Nass with his Teamer Aetherworks deck. Now this is a combo deck, basically, and I've talked a little bit about this on the channel, but I haven't gotten a chance to cover it yet. So, and I feel like this is actually a really straightforward deck, so this is my chance to cover it in just a minute or two here. But it really is that straightforward. You know, in the early game, we'll try to get energy with the Tomb with Aether, and the two puzzle knots. You see Glass Blowers and Woodweavers there. But basically just get a bunch of energy, and on turn 4, you'll drop Aetherworks Marvel. If you don't have it in your opening hand, Glint Nest Crane can help you find it on turn 2. But on turn 4, we'll play and tap the Marvel and try to find one of our Giant Eldrazi, which we're playing play sets of 4 Ulamog and 4 Emrakul. So pretty straightforward deck here. Just get a bunch of energy, get your Marvel by turn 4, and try to get a huge Eldrazi. Like a turn 4 Emrakul with the cast trigger, very nice, obviously. Here's the lands on the board right here. The lands I don't have to talk about too much. Aether Hub shows up here, and it's actually needed here. Providing an energy for absolutely nothing is nice, and it's a 3-color deck, so we probably will use the hub at some point. And then the board is fairly cut and dry. Note more a playset of Ceremonious Rejection. There's that again. And note the playset of Glimmer of Genius, a card that a lot of people played in the main over the weekend. If there is one sort of breakout uncommon, there's a couple of them over the weekend, but this is sort of one of the premier ones that a lot of people were talking about. Just probably the best thing to flash back with Torrential Gearhulk, you know, because that's like 10 mana worth of value, and a lot of decks were looking to do that. So Glimmer of Genius, no joke, very serious card in the format right now. Fifth place this weekend was Pierre Dajan with his Blue-Red Spells deck, one of the most interesting decks of the entire day, and it's really not too hard to build either. You know, it just plays a bunch of spells. Like, it does exactly what it says it does, and it's going to win off of Torrential Gearhulk and board control in the very late game, or sometimes Dynavolt Tower. There it is, right there. The deck actually forgoes playing Thermo Alchemist, which it probably did in its very early stages of development, and plays Dynavolt Tower instead, and for good reason, obviously. I played Dynavolt Tower in a deck recently too, and really liked that. I was sort of surprised by how good Tower was. So I'm not really that surprised to see it right here. It looks like the deck's main win condition. And I didn't see the deck much in action over the weekend, but it looks straightforward too. Plays a slight madness theme, you know, Tormenting Voices in there, as well as Lightning Axe, so you can discard cards. And then just a bunch of really low to the ground stuff. You know, we'll play Anticipate and take inventory to keep our card advantage up. We'll play some Burn in there with, you know, Harness Lightning, Fiery Temper, Galvanic Bombardment. We got some counter magic in the form of Void Shatter. Just a very basic and straightforward Blue-Red Spells deck, but it does a lot of work in the current format. I really should point out how good Torrential Gearhulk was over the weekend. A lot of people talking about this card, and it just sort of instantly jumped to best Gearhulk in a lot of people's minds. We've been calling that since day one, man. I've really liked Torrential Gearhulk for a long time now, and I'm glad to see him get his day in the sun. Who knows if he'll continue to be an important card in this format, but just based on this top 8, he pretty much immediately is, and will probably, if he hasn't already, will likely undergo a price spike, because the card has been very important on this weekend at least. Here's the lands on the board. Aether Hub yet again, but again, not surprising to see it. You know, Harness Lightning's in the deck, a couple of other things. Glimmer of Genius is in there. So not surprised to see Aether Hub. I just want to again point out how popular that card was over the weekend. It's now sporting like a $3 price tag for an uncommon in a standard legal set, which is insane, but the card is that good and is necessary in a lot of mana bases right here. As far as the sideboard goes, Ceremonious Rejection shows up yet again. There it is in nearly every board over the weekend. Negate also shows up, and Negate was in a few main decks that I've seen over the weekend. It's just that good right now. You know, it counters Planeswalkers, counters spells, obviously, non-creature spells, that's what it's all about. So instants and sorceries, removal, you can protect your things with it, you know, just really flexible card, and obviously has the added benefit of countering vehicles, like Smuggler's Copter, Fleetwheel Cruiser, just fan-freaking-tastic card right now. Negate could be in a lot of main decks, and as a matter of fact, it is. It's just really flexible. As a matter of fact, you could say that Negate won the Pro Tour. The final play of the game was Negate countering something in the finals of this Pro Tour. So Negate just that good right now. Also, before I move on, note Nebulous of Frost and Thing in the Ice. Thing in the Ice actually in the Pro Tour winning deck. As a 4-of, it was really good over the weekend. And we'll get to talking a little bit more about that later. But Nebulous of Frost, a play set in this deck, in the board at least. And to hear people tell it, this card did very well. I didn't actually end up seeing it on camera at all, but to hear tale of people talking about having seen this card. Nebulous of Frost was a powerhouse. From everything I've heard, Nebulous of Frost was just incredible by all accounts. So maybe we should try that out in main decks. I have not really given it much of a chance, and there were some people that liked the card when it first came out, but again, haven't given it much of a chance. I'd like to try it now, though. Coming in 4th over the weekend was Ben Hull with his red-white vehicles list, and this is pretty much the standard red-white vehicles list that we've been seeing for a couple of weeks here, you know. It's got Selfless Spirit in it, a fairly recent addition to the deck. But other than that, this is the list. You know, there's really not too much innovation here. Gideon was in a lot of sideboards at the very beginning of the format for this deck, but it has been moved into the main, and we did that. I'm not going to toot my own horn too much. I'm going to move on pretty quick here, but in our red-white vehicles deck was the very first deck that we put up in Kaladesh Standard. We had it up before anybody else. And I put a 2-of Gideon in the deck, and a lot of people in the comments were like, Gideon doesn't go in here. He looks totally jammed. You know, it just doesn't look right. It's awkward. But here Gideon is, a 2-of in these vehicles decks, and a lot of these vehicles decks, because he just is that good. You know, he helps crew things. And he's great against control decks, you know, his first loyalty ability there. And then putting, you know, the emblem out is fantastic in these heavy creature-based decks. So Gideon does everything you want him to do, and was maybe one of the most popular cards over the weekend. He just showed up in everything. And the cheapest part of a vehicles deck, the land base, right here, not going to cost you too much to build that, and it's fairly straightforward. As is the board, honestly, but there is some tech in here. Skywhaler's Shot is slowly becoming better than people thought it would be, definitely. Chandra Torch of Defiance, the 1-of copy in the sideboard, is all the Chandra that you will see for the weekend, just the 1 copy, which is really, really sad. A lot of people speculated very hard on this card, and it's still got plenty of time to become an important card. It's obviously very good. It's all those abilities. Just check that out. But it just wasn't important, at least over this weekend. Who knows what will happen in the future. But hopefully her price will go down a little bit and we can pick her up for cheaper. That'd be nice. And Weaver of Lightning is the other big important piece of tech here in the sideboard. We are seeing that a lot more often in these Thermo Alchemist decks and the burn decks in the format. And then this red-white vehicles deck employs it as well, because Weaver really is that good. I think the first person I saw to pick this up was actually Wedge at the Mana Source. One of his decks said that Weaver of Lightning was just an amazing sideboard card, and it turns out you, my friend, were right. Good job on Weaver. We are in the top 3, ladies and gentlemen. Number 3 over the weekend was Makis Matsoukas with his red-white tokens deck. Now this is a cool deck right here. This is right up my alley, honestly. This is a lot like the red-white vehicles deck, but the only vehicle it plays is Smuggler's Copter, and that makes room for Reckless Bushwhacker. This deck is just much, much lower to the ground than the other vehicles decks. You know, we play that same suite of 1-drops in Exemplar, Apprentice, Thraben Inspector, and then we play Copter on turn 2. We got a lot of stuff that can crew it, you know. Reckless Bushwhacker comes down turn 3 or 4, and usually if it comes down turn 4, it'll win the game. You know, just Reckless Bushwhacker, very, very good in a strategy like this. And the payoff for not having a mid-game plan like Sky Sovereign or Fleetwheel Cruiser is to be able to play Reckless Bushwhacker and just take the game out of nowhere. And it is almost certainly the cheapest deck in the entire top 8, you know. And yeah, the Smuggler's Copter is going to cost you a little bit. There's Gideon's in there too. But overall, this looks like a pretty cheap deck, like $150 at first glance, I want to say, on TCG Player. Just fairly affordable. A lot of fun, and I want to shuffle this up. Here's another red-white mana base right here. It looks pretty much the same. And then there's a sideboard to this deck as well, which also looks pretty much the same. Notice Thalia making an appearance there. Lantern Scout even shows up. That's pretty cool. And Make a Stand. I was just pimping this card in a deck tech the other day, talking about how much I love to make a stand, and here it is in the sideboard of a Pro Tour Top 8 deck, because it is that good. Just good against Radiant Flames, good against Kozilek's Return, you know, a lot of stuff, you know, good against Fumigate right now even. So I really like to make a stand in the limited playtesting I've done with that white aggro deck. And I see it here, and there's definitely a good reason for it. Make a Stand is just awesome. Now we're getting into the finals. Deck number 2 on the day. Made it to the big game and then ended up losing, but was still a fantastic deck. Carlos Romeo, Jeskai Control right here. We see 3 whole Torrential Gearhulks in the deck because we've got 20 instants that we're playing. We're also playing 5 spells that can sweep the board, the 2 Fumigate and the 3 Radiant Flames. But the instants are the real story here. You know, we've got Void Shatter shows up in another deck. That's pretty cool. Void Shatter, you know, counter magic actually becoming a real thing. Although we didn't really see too much revolutionary rebuff over the weekend, again, because people are very scared of Smuggler's Copter and artifacts, other vehicles too, Fleet Wheel Cruiser and stuff. So we didn't see really any revolutionary rebuff, which is a huge surprise. Instead, we saw Void Shatter, which did a lot of work over the weekend. And there's Glimmer of Genius, was just talking about it earlier, a full 4 of, because it's one of the things we really want to flash back with a Torrential Gearhulk. You know, but, you know, when you play Torrential Gearhulk and flashback a Void Shatter, basically make it a Draining Welcome, you know, that's always a good play too. In combat, they swing in and you flash back, say, a Harness Lightning or an Immolating Glare, and put in a giant-bodied Gearhulk, you know, that's a pretty stupid, crazy play too. So Torrential Gearhulk is doing so much work. And do note, I just brought it up, the presence of Immolating Glare. I was also saying the other day, this could be a very good card against all the vehicles in the deck, especially Smuggler's Copter, and it looks like someone has at least tried that out too. So I'm glad to see Immolating Glare here, because I think it's a very good card right this second. 26 lands in the deck. Aether Hub again. I'm just going to always say Aether Hub. It's seriously in literally every mana base in the format. That's what's driving its price up so much. Just the price of Aether Hub is driving me crazy. So I kind of point it out every time I see it, which is all the time. And then the sideboard right here. Again, a lot of straightforward sideboards over the weekend. This deck's going to play all the Gideons in the board, but Gideon is still there. Same thing with Ceremonious Rejection. It's there. You know, just these sideboards in the format seem to be fairly set in stone at this point. They'll all play a lot of the same things. But the best deck of the weekend after the dust settled and the smoke cleared was legendary players Shota Yasuoka's Grixis Control. Grixis Control, ladies and gentlemen, officially a thing again. A lot of people really hold Grixis Control near and dear, and although this doesn't necessarily look a lot like the Grixis Control decks of the past, it does have similarities, you know, counter magic and cheap removal. That's the whole game plan, which is what Grixis always tries to do, but it has great tools to help it do that right now. Thing in the Ice, centerpiece card in the deck. Saw it transform a bunch of times on camera. It almost always wins the game after a couple of turns. Thing in the Ice, fantastic right now in this format with all this low to the ground aggro that doesn't play that much removal. You know, you see a couple of copies of Declaration in Stone in a few decks, and you see Harness Lightning in a lot of decks, but only as a 3 of in most things. And that meant that Thing in the Ice had a real chance to go under the radar because it's not going to be hit too often. And these decks flip it very, very quickly. Note that this deck plays 21 instants. The last deck played 20, and that was a lot. And this one gets access to a lot of fantastic removal. Unlicensed Disintegration shows back up. We were just talking about how good Harness Lightning is right now. Galvanic Bombardment in a lot of decks over the weekend. And this one even plays a 1-of Essence Extraction, you know. Kill that Smuggler's Copter, gain one of the attack steps back in life. That seems pretty good, too. A lot of card advantage. You know, you see Glimmer of Genius and Anticipate show up again. Painful Truths hanging out. So, just really, really well put together deck by Yasuoka. But he's known as one of the best deck builders in the world, and this is his second Pro Tour win, and definitely deserved. This looks like a fan-freaking-tastic deck, and you guys know me, I love all these silver bullets here. The 1-of Ceremonious Rejection in the main deck, I think very much warranted after seeing it in the sideboard, and it gets sided in all the time of all these decks. I love the silver bullet Essence Extraction. The 1-of Transgress I think is great too. As the kind of guy that builds the kind of decks I do, I just love the construction of this with all the 1 and 2-ofs. Just obviously masterfully built. 26 lands in this deck, and note what's not in there. Aether Hub. doesn't show up in this one. Of all the decks that Aether Hub isn't in, it's the winning deck of the day. That's pretty crazy, and I just wanted to point that out. But here's the sideboard where we see a lot of more 1 and 2 of. Some of these are filling out play sets or just, adding another copy to a card that's already in the main deck. We see a lot of sort of finagling here. Confiscation Coup. I'm glad that's in the board as well. I really like Coup a lot. And I'm just glad that it at least got some sideboard play. It seems like it'd definitely be worth it. And then Weaver of Lightning, again, shows up in this deck. Good job on that. Weaver of Lightning looks fantastic in these decks that play a ton of instants and sorceries and stuff. That damage adds up quickly. So Grixis Control, at the end of the day, it's back. It's actually back. Like, I've loved Grixis Control for a long time, and I know a lot of people have too. Apparently, this is the format for it, We have things like Torrential Gear Hulk that are just crazy with all of our instants, So, I really, really like that Grixis list. And actually, I like a lot of these lists. You may have noticed that a lot of that was just me gushing over how much I like a lot of these lists. We've got really, really low to the ground aggro. We've got really, really, just hard draw go control that plays a lot of instants in the format. So we've got a lot of these like old school Magic archetypes right now, and I think that's really, really cool. Note that a little while ago I got a lot of questions about this. I said that aggro is usually very good at the beginning of a format, and within a few weeks, control will usually take over once it figures out the right plan. What removal do we play? What are the best in-game strategies for us in a format full of aggro? What are the best sweepers to play? What's the best, do we play 2 of this, 3 of that, 1 of that? What are the best sort of numbers? And I think Control is figuring that out, as evidenced by the fact that the finals match was 2 just super hardcore control decks. But don't think control is just the best archetype in the format right now. I think that aggro still has a lot of good ways to victory, good plans. So I'm really, really excited to see the format sort of develop from here. I want to know where we go. How do we beat control? Mid-range, notably, not a presence hardly at all. Even the green-white mid-range deck that plays, Verder's Gear Hulk, not really a thing over the weekend at all. Mid-range was just completely blown out by all the really, really fast aggro and all the control decks that can handle all of their plans. So will there be sort of a striking back of mid-range? Where do we go from here? So a lot of really cool questions moving forward. I want to know how you guys feel about not only this top 8, but the format moving forward. Are there any things that people are missing maybe? What's a good deck? What do you think's poised? What do you think isn't good anymore? Notice that the lack of green-black Delirium, which was doing good as like a week ago. It was showing up in top 8 still. So what's up with Delirium? What happened there? Is it still a deck? A lot of questions moving forward. So really excited to hear what you guys think about all that. That's all I've got for now, at least. If you enjoyed the content, like the content, sub if you're new, so you get all of this and the deck text coming up. The next one, by the way, what are we doing next time? Is Green Stompy. Just mono Green Stompy, a deck I've loved since like 1997, and you never see it anymore. But I think there's actually a case for it in the format, speaking of mid-range. So I'll be showing that to you in the next couple of days. Make sure you sub so you get that notification, and I will see you guys next time. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.